We're sorry, but due to limited capacity, we've had to make difficult decisions. We hope you understand. That was the line. The one that ended the message. The one that lit the match. It was delivered in a soft, blush-toned envelope with calligraphy so pretty it felt like an insult. And inside, instead of a wedding invitation, was what I can only call a disinvite. Who even does that? Sends an official, embossed card to say, "You're not welcome"? Tessa does. Or rather, Tessa's mother, my Aunt Carolyn, who signs everything off like she's curating a royal banquet. The wedding of the decade, they'd called it. Private vineyard estate, weekend-long festivities, black tie only. My cousin Tessa was marrying Christopher Linwood, handsome, wealthy, a real estate heir with a jawline that probably got him through half of Harvard. And me? I was the cousin no one could place at Thanksgiving. I stared at the card on my kitchen counter, beside my chipped coffee mug and a stack of overnights I hadn't done laundry for. It sat there like a dare, soft and lovely, like rejection disguised as etiquette. My name's Naomi Clarke. I'm 32. I work nights at an urgent care clinic now. Not glamorous, but stable. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment above a bookstore, and I keep my social life somewhere between low maintenance and invisible. I was supposed to be at that wedding. The original RSVP was a yes. A quiet yes. The kind where you know you'll be seated near the back, but you still show up because family matters, right? Then the card arrived, and with it, the reminder. I was only ever a guest in this family, not a member. Have you ever been erased by people who never said it out loud? Just gently uninvited. Silently edited out. If that feeling's ever brushed your ribs like a cold draft, take a moment to subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your voice in the quiet. Now, let's listen to my story journey. Tess and I grew up 3 blocks apart. We were only 6 months apart in age, but worlds apart in how we were raised. She went to ballet, I went to the library. Her mother styled her hair with pearl clips and vintage scarves. My mom worked double shifts and let me figure it out with a ponytail and a rubber band. They called Tessa our golden girl. They called me solid. I didn't mind. Not at first. It's funny how you can spend years learning how to disappear politely. To laugh when they make backhanded comments about your sensible shoes or your practical car while sipping from glasses you can't pronounce. I smiled. I stayed in my lane. I didn't rock boats. But the distance widened over time. I became the one who never posted on social media, who never brought a date to Christmas, who sometimes didn't even show up, and when I did, always left early. That's the thing about being quiet. People think it means you have nothing to say. I kept secrets. Not the messy kind, but the heavy ones. The kind that press on your chest when you lie down. The kind you don't share because it'll sound like you're begging for something. Like validation. Or worse, sympathy. And nothing makes this family more uncomfortable than sympathy. The last family gathering I went to was Tessa's engagement party. Her ring was the size of my student debt. Her fiancé was, well, charming in that smooth, magazine ad kind of way. He made a toast and thanked everyone who believed in us, which, ironically, excluded the girl standing near the appetizer tray, sipping seltzer with lime, me. No one introduced me. No one even asked what I'd been doing. If they had, I might have told them I'd just gotten promoted to head triage at my clinic, that I was working with community outreach to help train teen volunteers, that I'd recently spoken at a trauma workshop in Denver, but no one asked, so I didn't say. That party was 7 months ago. This envelope arrived 3 weeks before the wedding. It wasn't a shock? Not really, but it still carved something out of me. At first I told myself not to care. I wasn't close with Tessa. The wedding would be performative, a spectacle. Probably cold chicken and lukewarm champagne. But then I found myself sitting on my living room floor at 2 a.m., in scrubs that smelled like antiseptic and regret, staring at that disinvite like it owed me something, like it was confirmation that I'd failed some unspoken test. And the worst part? I hadn't even told them. Any of them. I hadn't told them what happened 8 years ago, the thing that changed everything, the night I met Christopher, the night he stopped breathing. Not because it was a secret, but because they never thought to ask. I fold the card neatly. I put it back in the envelope. I slide it into the drawer with old receipts and expired coupons and a photo strip from nursing school I still can't throw away. I tell myself to forget it. But that's the thing about silence. It doesn't forget you. It just waits. And mine was about to be broken. Not by me, by the groom. When I was little, I used to sit on the edge of the couch at family gatherings and imagine I was someone else. Not because I didn't like myself, I just didn't fit the picture. The Clarks are loud, well-dressed, career shiny and charming in a way that photographs well. Every holiday felt like a corporate networking event in disguise. Tessa, my cousin, always at the center, laughing, storytelling, performing. She could command a room by breathing. I, on the other hand, hovered at the outskirts, making friends with the family dog and washing dishes no one asked me to clean. Growing up, my mom and I weren't exactly close to the rest of the family. She was the oldest of 5 siblings, but she married young and poor. My dad left before I turned 6. I barely remember his face. But I remember how my mom worked nights at the diner and how she'd rub her feet with menthol cream every morning, eyes barely open. When Tessa got a pony for her 12th birthday, I got a bicycle someone else had left by the curb. It wasn't jealousy. I didn't need the pony. What I wanted was for someone to say, "Naomi, we see you too." But they never did. I was 16 when I decided to become a nurse. Not a doctor, not a surgeon. A nurse. Everyone in the family assumed I hadn't aimed higher. I heard the whispers at my cousin Ryan's graduation party. "She's smart enough for med school, isn't she?" And the response, "Maybe she doesn't have the drive. She's always been kind of safe." Safe. That word stuck to me like a label stitched inside my uniform. Like being safe meant I hadn't burned. Like I hadn't already survived more fires than they'd ever smell. In truth, I chose nursing because I wanted to be the one who didn't leave the room, the one who stayed when things got hard, the one holding the hand when no one else knew how. I put myself through school working double shifts, eating cereal out of mugs, and skipping social outings for anatomy exams. I graduated early, with honors. No one showed up to the ceremony. That was okay. I was used to clapping for myself. I got my first job in an ER downtown. It was chaos. Organized, feral chaos. People screaming, phones ringing, sometimes blood on the floor, sometimes laughter. Often both in the same hour. I found rhythm in the madness. I liked being invisible, useful. I liked being the steady pulse in a room full of panic. That's where I was the night it happened, 8 years ago. Middle of February. Black ice everywhere. One of the worst pileups in Denver history. That night is burned into my body like a watermark. I was 24, just a few months into the job. Still flinching when people flatlined, still learning how to breathe when they didn't come back. He came in unconscious, no ID, just labeled as John Doe on the board. Paramedics said he'd been in a black SUV, clipped a barrier, flipped twice. The car had wrapped around itself like a question mark. He'd been pulled out by fire rescue with a pulse so faint it barely counted. I remember the gash on his forehead, the blood in his ear canal, the way his chest rose, then stuttered, then didn't. I remember calling it out. Code Blue. I remember the sound of the crash cartwheels on tile, the paddles, the shouting, the silence. Everyone gave up at minute 7. I didn't. I kept pressing, kept breathing for him. Someone told me to stop. "We've done what we can," they said, but something in me said no. I pressed down again and again, my hands aching, my arms screaming. I whispered, "Stay with me, just stay." At minute 9, his heart jumped. Once, then again, then steady. He survived. He was still unconscious, but he made it. I stayed by his side for another hour, until his blood pressure stabilized, until the next call came in and I had to run to another room. I never saw him again, didn't even know his name. The attending physician later called it instinctual persistence, some fancy phrase for, "You refuse to quit." They filed the report. It never made news. Not every miracle does. I didn't think about him much after that. Maybe once or twice in quiet moments, wondering if he had a family, if he ever found out. Turns out, he did. Turns out his name was Christopher Linwood. And turns out, 8 years later, he was going to marry my cousin. But I didn't know that then. Back then, all I knew was that I'd kept someone alive, that I'd carried that weight in my hands and refused to let it slip, and that no one in my family had ever asked me what I'd done with my life. They just assumed it wasn't worth mentioning. That's the thing about being quiet. You learn to be your own witness, your own applause. But even silence has its limits. Even ghosts come back when the timing is right. And mine? Mine was about to walk down the aisle in a tuxedo, with no memory of my face. Not yet. But soon. The week after I got the disinvite, I told no one. Not my coworkers, not my landlord who always asked about my fancy family. Not even Alma, my closest friend and the only person who truly knew what I'd been through as a nurse. I buried it the way you bury a bruise, quietly, under long sleeves and practiced smiles. But bruises don't stay hidden forever. They bloom. They ache. They ask to be known. That Friday, Alma asked if I wanted to join her at a local medical gala. She had an extra ticket, courtesy of a friend from the hospital board. I hesitated. I didn't feel like dressing up, didn't feel like talking to people about budgets or healthcare initiatives while pretending I belonged in a cocktail dress. But she gave me that look. The one that said, "You need air, Naomi. You need to leave your apartment before you sink into it." So I went. I wore a simple navy dress with capped sleeves. Not trendy, not tight. Just enough to say I tried. Alma looked stunning, of course. All elegance and easy grace, gliding through the hotel ballroom like she owned it. The place was packed. Every table had white linens, gold-trimmed chargers, and tiny name cards in looping cursive. String quartet in the corner. Waiters in black slacks and tight smiles weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne and shrimp tartlets. I stuck near Alma at first, quietly sipping seltzer and nodding through introductions. Most people were from hospitals or nonprofit organizations, researchers, heads of departments, philanthropists, people with last names that opened doors. And then I saw him. He was across the room, laughing at something a man in a tux said, his hand resting lightly on a woman's back, Tessa's. They looked like a magazine cover, all perfect posture and tailored silhouettes. Christopher Linwood. Even now, 8 years later, I knew him. The scar on his forehead was barely visible, softened into his hairline. But I recognized his face, not from the night of the crash, but from the recovery photos I later saw in a post-discharge newsletter. A feature about young survivors and second chances. I didn't plan to go near him. I didn't want to create drama. I didn't want Tessa to see me and throw her wine glass in surprise. I was content to stay invisible. But the universe has its own ideas. I was standing near a floral arrangement shaped like a literal stethoscope when I felt someone stop behind me, the kind of stop that carries weight. Attention. "Excuse me," a voice said, low and deliberate. "Do I know you?" I turned. He was closer than I expected. Taller, somehow. His brows furrowed as his eyes scanned my face, his drink frozen in midair. I'm sorry, your eyes. I feel like I've seen you before, he said. I smiled politely, a practiced reflex. Probably just a familiar face. He stared for another beat. Then, and I swear this part happened in slow motion, his face changed. Not in shock, not in confusion, in remembrance. Wait, he said. 2016, Denver General. February, a car accident, black SUV. I woke up 2 days later, but someone told me. He trailed off, blinking rapidly. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. You were the nurse, he whispered. The one who didn't stop. They told me a woman kept going long after they called it. That you wouldn't give up on me. His voice was softer now. Barely there. You said, stay with me. Through the mask. I felt the world shift around me, like the floor had finally realigned beneath my feet. I didn't know your name, he added. Naomi, I said. Naomi Clarke. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me like I was some secret the world had buried and forgotten to unearth. Why didn't you say anything? He asked. Because no one wanted to hear it. Because it didn't come with applause or invitations or engraved cards. Because I didn't save you for recognition. I don't know, I said instead. It didn't seem important at the time. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for years. Tessa appeared beside him, all silk and polished teeth. She blinked when she saw me. Naomi? She said, surprised, not quite warm. What are you doing here? Came with a friend? I replied simply. Christopher didn't look at her. He was still staring at me. She saved my life, he said. Her smile faltered. What? She was the nurse, from the accident. Tessa blinked, processing. Then she forced a laugh, too sharp. Oh wow, that's small world. Small world. That's what they say when something huge has just cracked open and they don't know what else to say. We didn't speak much after that. Christopher got pulled into a conversation. Tessa kept glancing at me like I was a puzzle she hadn't studied for. I slipped out early, thanked Alma, and took a cab home. But the next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. Thank you for staying. You changed everything. Christopher. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down. Because I had a feeling this wasn't over. Not yet. 2 days after the gala, I got a call from my Aunt Carolyn. That alone should have been a red flag. She never called unless someone died or needed a last-minute babysitter. Naomi, she said, syrupy sweet. I heard you bumped into Tessa and Christopher at the fundraiser. Isn't that funny? Funny, I repeated flat. Yes, well. She cleared her throat. I just wanted to make sure there aren't any, misunderstandings. Christopher's under a lot of pressure this month, and it's important the focus stays on the wedding. There it was. Not even a full 48 hours, and I was already being warned to stay in line. I didn't respond. You know how emotional things can get? She added, lowering her voice. Let's not confuse gratitude with obligation. I wasn't confused, I said quietly, but thank you for the clarity. I hung up before she could backtrack. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years, scrolling through Tessa's social media. Engagement photos, bridal showers, brunches with flower crowns, all perfectly filtered in white and rose gold. There were speeches, toasts, hugs. I wasn't in a single frame, not even a tagged post from the engagement party I had actually attended. It was like I'd been airbrushed out of the family's narrative. Except now, Christopher remembered. And that was something they couldn't erase. Still, I didn't expect what happened next. A week before the wedding, a second envelope arrived. This one wasn't from Tessa or Aunt Carolyn. It was handwritten. Dark blue ink on cream cardstock. No return address. Inside was a short note. Naomi, I know it's late notice, but I would be honored if you attended the wedding. I understand if you decline, but I hope you'll come. I want you there. Christopher. No flowery excuses, no manipulation, just truth. I sat with it for hours. There was no formal RSVP, no instructions. Just a line from a man who now knew who I was, who I had been, who I still was. I told myself I wouldn't go. And then I went anyway. The wedding was at a vineyard just outside Boulder. Mountains rising in the background like ancient witnesses. Rows of white folding chairs stretched across a grassy knoll, and everything looked like a movie set. Real, but too pristine. I wore a navy blue dress again. Same one from the gala. My only nice dress. Hair pulled back. No makeup. I didn't come to perform. The ushers didn't recognize me. They fumbled at the guest list. I wasn't on it. I started to turn away, already rehearsing the silent retreat. Again, always again. Then I heard my name. Naomi? I turned. Christopher was walking across the courtyard, tuck's jacket open, boutonniere slightly crooked. His smile was soft this time. Grateful. I'm glad you came, he said. I wasn't on the list. You were always on mine, he said. He glanced at the seating chart, then at me. Would you mind sitting up front? I know that's unusual, but I want you close. I nodded, unsure what to say. He walked me to the second row, near his parents. The air shifted around us as other guests turned to look. Some smiled politely. Others whispered. Then Tessa appeared. She looked stunning, perfect even. But when her eyes locked on me sitting near the front, her mouth pressed into a tight line. She didn't say a word. The ceremony started. Vows, rings, the usual. But when the officiant asked if anyone wanted to speak before they were pronounced husband and wife, something happened I never expected. Christopher stepped forward. I want to say something, he said. Tessa's smile froze. I wouldn't be standing here today if not for someone in this room, he began. 8 years ago, I was in a car crash. I flatlined. I was gone. And one nurse, just one, refused to give up. She kept going long after protocol said stop. She saved my life. He looked straight at me. She's sitting right here. Naomi Clarke. I didn't even know her name until a week ago, but I owe her everything. Gasps. Real ones. Murmurs spread like wind through wheat. And while I'm grateful for everyone who's helped shape my life, he continued, Naomi is the reason I got to shape one at all. I want to thank her, not just for that night, but for showing me what persistence, compassion, and quiet strength look like. The officiant stood frozen. Tessa looked like she'd swallowed glass. Christopher turned back, took Tessa's hands, and smiled. Now we can continue. But everything had already changed, because in one moment, the silence cracked. And for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. After the ceremony, the reception unfolded like any high society affair. Champagne towers, string quartets, fairy lights twinkling as the sun dipped behind the hills. But for me, everything was vibrating, surreal. People kept approaching me, one by one. Some offered soft handshakes, others just nodded with awkward reverence. A woman in a pale green dress whispered, I'm in med school. What you did, it gives me hope. I thanked her, smiled, but I was somewhere else. Distant. Tessa didn't come near me. Not during photos, not during dinner, not during the first dance. She was perfect as always, beaming at guests, tilting her head just so. But I caught it. The quick glances, the flicker behind her lashes when people walked away from her to greet me. I hadn't come to steal attention. I'd barely wanted to come at all. But when you carry truth quietly for so long, even the whisper of it landing in the open can sound like thunder. I stood near the bar, sipping seltzer when Christopher approached again. This time, slower, more measured, like he didn't want to startle me. "I meant every word," he said. "I hope that wasn't too much." I shook my head. "You didn't owe me anything." "I did, though," he said. "And I still do." I looked at him then. Really looked. His eyes weren't full of pity. They were full of recognition. "Tessa didn't want me to invite you," he admitted. "I figured. She said it would complicate things, that you might take the moment away from her." "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice flat but calm. "She gave it away the second she decided kindness had limits." He nodded, staring into his glass. "She's not cruel. She just sees the world in titles. Stories that make sense. You never fit the script." "No," I said. "I rewrote mine too many times to be cast in theirs." He smiled at that. Not a condescending smile, an understanding one. We didn't talk long. The band struck up something jazzy, and the crowd drifted toward the dance floor. I slipped away. By the time dessert was served, I was halfway down the dirt path to the parking lot, heels in one hand, the cool air brushing my skin like mercy. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Not because I was restless, but because something was shifting, settling. I'd gone years letting people assume I'd never done anything remarkable. I never corrected them, never offered evidence. I told myself it was humility. Maybe it was. But maybe, too, it was fear of being resented, of being seen, of being questioned in rooms where love was transactional and attention a currency. Christopher's words didn't make me a hero, but they did one thing that mattered more than any medal or thank you card. They restored my name. For years, even in the mirror, I'd looked at myself like someone unfinished. Not a victim, not broken, just incomplete. Like I was still waiting for a version of me to arrive that others would finally accept. But I was already here. I'd been here the whole time. The next day, I did something wild. I printed a photo, one I kept saved, but never framed. It was taken by a coworker at the hospital, years ago, right after I completed a triage training program. In it, I'm standing by a crash cart, sweat on my forehead, my arms bare, scrubs wrinkled and stained. There's a bandage on my left wrist, but I'm smiling. Not the camera-ready kind. The real kind. Exhausted, yes, but proud, present, whole. I hung it above my desk. Then I pulled out my notebook and wrote something on the first page. "You are not the empty chair. You are the reason the table still stands." I closed the book and breathed. A week later, I got another message. This one from an old nursing school classmate named Claire. She was starting a mental health program for trauma nurses, peer support, burnout prevention, grief circles, and asked if I'd consider helping. Not for show, not for pay, just to be a voice in the room. I said yes. That night, I began outlining a workshop, holding the line when no one sees you, because I'd learned something at that wedding, something that rewired the way I see myself. We spend so much time waiting for someone else to name us. Hero, success, worthy. But sometimes we have to give ourselves the title before anyone else does. And if that title never comes, we carry the truth anyway. That's what I did. That's what I still do. 3 months passed. The wedding faded into memory for most people. A new niece was born. Someone got promoted. Another engagement was announced. The Carter family moved on like a well-oiled machine of glossy events and polite forgetfulness. But not for me. Not because I was holding a grudge, but because something inside me had changed. I stopped showing up just to be ignored. Stopped answering vague family group texts. stopped contorting myself to be small enough to fit at tables where I was never meant to sit. I stopped apologizing for the weight of my presence. And the silence? It was quieter than ever, but it was also peaceful. Until the morning I received another invitation. This one wasn't floral or foiled. No calligraphy, no RSVP number. It was an email. From Tessa. Subject line: if you have time. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Naomi, I know things have been tense. And I didn't say thank you. I should have. Christopher talks about you often. He says you changed his life. And honestly, it's taken me a while to understand that didn't mean you were trying to take anything from mine. I'm not good at sharing the stage. But you never asked for a spotlight. I see that now. If you'd ever like to get coffee, I'd like to try. Tessa. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I was no longer measuring my worth by other people's awakenings. I wasn't waiting for them to catch up. I was already down the road, building something new. The trauma nurse support group was taking off. We'd hosted our first weekend workshop at a rec center just south of Denver. It wasn't fancy. Mismatched chairs, weak coffee, donated name tags. But it was real. And it was full. One by one, nurses sat in a circle and told stories they hadn't spoken aloud in years. I still smell the antiseptic when I try to sleep, one said. I had to tell a mother her child didn't make it and then go clean a supply closet, said another. I don't want to be thanked. I just want to not disappear. Every word sat heavy and holy. I shared too. I told them about that night in the ER. About Christopher. About pressing on his chest when protocol said stop. I told them I wasn't brave. I was just tired of watching people vanish without someone fighting for them. One nurse cried. Another hugged me so tightly I felt my ribs shift. That night, I got home and opened Tessa's email again. This time, I responded. I appreciate the message. I'm open to meeting. Let's not talk about the wedding. Let's talk like humans. Naomi. We met at a quiet cafe the next week. She looked nervous. I didn't. We talked. Nothing dramatic. No apologies dripping with tears, but realness. Enough of it to know the distance was still there. But maybe now we both knew how to walk our side of the bridge with dignity. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't need to. She asked what I was doing these days, and I told her about the trauma support group. That sounds hard, she said. It is, I replied, but so is being forgotten. She nodded slowly, and for once, she didn't look like the golden girl. She looked like someone unsure how to shine in a room where the light didn't only belong to her. Before we left, she reached into her bag and handed me something. A photo. Me at the wedding, sitting quietly in the second row. A soft beam of sunlight catching my shoulder. Not smiling, not posing, just there. I thought you might want it, she said. I took it. Not because I needed proof, but because I wanted a reminder. I showed up. Even when I wasn't wanted. Even when they tried to erase me. I came. I stood still. I told the truth. Later that week, Christopher sent another message. We're funding a new clinic near Glenwood Springs. Emergency care, trauma training, outreach. Would you consider joining the board? Not because of what you did for me, because of who you are. I said yes. Not because I needed validation, but because it's time I started writing my name in ink. On buildings, on programs, on lives. Spring in Colorado comes like a shy child, hesitant, gentle, taking its time to bloom. But when it does, it arrives in bursts, soft pink blossoms, crisp air, the kind of sun that doesn't demand attention but lingers like an old friend. That was the backdrop for the grand opening of the Glenwood Springs Community Response Center. Not a hospital, not a clinic. Something in between. A space for fast, localized trauma care, crisis support, nurse training, and rural health workshops. I wasn't the face of it. I didn't want to be, but I was one of the builders. My name didn't go on the signage, but it was etched into the mission statement, on the founding documents, and quietly, maybe most meaningfully, in the nurse's lounge. Above the bulletin board was a small plaque that read, "For the ones who kept going after everyone else gave up. In honor of NC." When I saw it, something inside me cracked. Not from pain, from release. Alma was there, grinning. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "They see you now." But I shook my head. "It's not about being seen anymore." She nodded. "But it's still nice, isn't it?" Yeah, it was. During the opening week, a local news crew came to do a feature. Nothing major, just one of those feel-good community stories for the 6 o'clock slot. They asked if someone from the board wanted to speak. Everyone looked at me. I said yes. We stood outside under a pale blue sky, the reporter angled just right, mic in hand, cameraman counting down. "Tell us what this center means to you," she said. I took a breath. The wind stirred my hair. I didn't look at the camera. I looked just past it, like I was speaking to someone who needed to hear it in their kitchen at home, with dinner half cooked and the TV humming. "This place," I said slowly, "isn't about heroics. It's about holding the line. When you're the one in the room, when you're the one who won't let go of a hand, even when the odds are impossible. It's for people who don't get parades or headlines. It's for the ones who survive the night shift and still show up the next day." I paused, swallowed. It's for the ones who stayed. The interview ran that weekend. My inbox flooded. Messages from nurses I'd trained with, students from my early outreach programs, strangers. One woman said her sister died in an ER waiting room, and she hoped places like ours would keep others from slipping through the cracks. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about reclaiming my place in a family that never made room for me. It was about building tables where no one had to ask permission to sit. Weeks passed. Then months. I still got the occasional family invite. Baby showers, holiday brunches. I attended a few, left most of them early, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed their approval like oxygen. Tessa and I stayed on polite terms. She sent a Christmas card. I sent one back. The air between us was no longer electric, just still. That was enough. Christopher visited the center once, donated another $100,000 quietly through a foundation. He hugged me before leaving and said, "You keep showing me who I want to be." I told him he already was. I still work. Still take overnight shifts sometimes when the center's short-staffed. I run support circles every other Thursday. We laugh more than we cry. One evening, after a particularly emotional debrief, a young nurse came up to me, fresh out of school, eyes heavy with everything she didn't yet know how to name. "Miss Naomi," she said, voice cracking, "have you ever felt invisible doing this?" I smiled. "All the time," I said, "but invisible doesn't mean unimportant. It just means the world hasn't caught up to your value yet." She nodded slowly. Tears slipped down, unashamed. Before she left, she added, "Thank you for staying. People like me need to see someone like you still standing." That night, I went home and pulled out the old email from Tessa, the one where she finally said thank you. I printed it, folded it, tucked it into the back of that same notebook where I once wrote, "You are not the empty chair. You are the reason the table still stands." And then I added one more line. "Sometimes we don't need a seat. We need to build the damn table." To anyone listening to this, maybe you've been uninvited. Maybe you've been erased, overlooked, called too much, or not enough. Maybe your silence became armor. Or maybe, like me, you're just tired of waiting to be asked in. I want you to hear this now. You matter. Even in rooms that pretend you don't. Especially there. And if you're still standing, then it's your turn to hold the door open for someone else. That's how we make it. That's how we heal. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, share your name in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's remind each other that even quiet truths carry heat. And if no one else has told you this lately, I see you, I honor you, and I'm glad you stayed.